and I will let the public in.
Busy one.
Ready? Pledge allegiance.
Ready?
Pledge allegiance.
To
the flag
flag.
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'd ask that everyone please silence all of your devices and move to a quiet location. Keep your devices muted until you're called upon to speak. Background noises are distracting to others, and they do not allow for a clear record of these proceedings. The 48-hour notice is required under the Open Public Meetings Act has been met. Notice of this meeting was emailed on March 3rd, 2021, published in the Asbury Park Press, the Co-Star, and the Co-Star. A copy has been placed on the bulletin board in the Borough office, and a copy has been filed with the Borough Clerk. Mr. Quinlan is excused this evening. Mr. Wade,
Here.
Mr. Afuso,
Here.
Mr. Critelli,
Here.
Ms. Brunel,
Here.
Ms. Rosenberg,
Here.
Ms. Saracine,
Here.
Ms. Leahy,
Here.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Here.
Okay, Chair Rosenberg.
Here.
And here this evening, we have Jillian McClear in for Mark Kittrick, attorney to the board, and Gerald Frieda, our board engineer. Christine Bell is excused this evening.
No correspondence in reference to the minutes. In the minutes last time, the last meeting, we made a motion, it was carried, but in the minutes, it's not written correctly. It's supposed to be in the Petruno matter that was supposed to be carried to the April meeting, but with re-notification, and it wasn't in the minutes.
Okay, I'll correct that with new notice being provided.
With that correction, I'd like to make a motion. We approve the minutes as correct.
Second.
Ms. Leahy, Ms. Rosenberg,
Yes.
Ms. Brunel,
Yes.
Mr. Wade,
Lily.
Mr. Wade,
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Afuso,
Yes.
Mr. Critelli,
Yes.
Ms. Saracine,
Here. Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
and Chair Rosenberg.
Yes. And we have a question on some of the applications. The coffee application will not be heard tonight. Is that being carried or just dropped?
He requested that this be carried without further notice. Their planner was unable to attend this evening.
Okay. So I make a motion, we carry that till the April meeting,
Not the April meeting.
May meeting?
I suggested May 20th, yes.
Okay, carry that to the May 20th meeting.
Give me 1 second.
Before you say that, Christie, did Petruno re-notice yet or just come back to you?
No, they're scheduled for April 15th, so I haven't received anything yet. I
Okay,
did send them the information so that they could renotice for the April Zoom meeting.
okay.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor was my second on carrying this application with no further
Yes.
notice. Okay. Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Mr. Afuso,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Brunel,
Yes.
Ms. Saracine,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
and Chair Rosenberg.
Yes. Mr. Beckman, you have two cases tonight. One of them is to be carried before we discuss, or both of them to be carried, etc.
No, so I spoke with Ms. McClear, and we are carrying the Young Hands case. We did indicate that to Christie already that we are carrying that. until, are we on the April meeting?
Yes, I suggested April 15th.
Okay,
And I don't believe we need to renotice for that. I do think, however, looking at that application and the new ordinance that will come into effect shortly, I think that application will now be fully compliant. We just have to review with the zoning officer to ensure that's the case. And if that is the case, we will probably withdraw that application. But obviously, at this point, I don't want to withdraw it to prejudice my client.
but my question is that ordinance probably won't be completely passed till the April. Do you want to carry it further? That's my question.
Well, it has already been approved by the commissioners. So I don't know what the time frame of them sending in the notice to the county clerk as well as to the publication, but I'm guessing that probably has already been done by now. And it's probably only going to be a matter of 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, so I make a motion, we carry the Young Hands application till April 15th without notification.
Thank you.
Second.
And I don't believe, Ms. McClear, I don't believe there's any issue with jurisdiction on that to carry it. There's no issue with the notice on that, correct?
No, we said without notice.
Yeah, but yeah, for purposes of determining that the notice was appropriate, that I've already submitted, because we did notice for this meeting. I think the board attorney has to determine that the notice is appropriate jurisdictionally, otherwise I would have to renotice.
It's my understanding that from our point of view, we do take jurisdiction. The notice was fine. So, there will be no renotice necessary.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was on the record. I appreciate that.
Seconded by Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Brunel,
Yes.
Mr. Afuso,
Yes.
Mr. Fratelli,
Yes.
Ms. Saracine,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
and Chair Rosenberg.
Yes. Now we have the English application. And from the notice that I've spoken to our attorney and engineer, there's some problem with the notice. I think we have to discuss that before further discussing the case.
That's correct. So there were 2 issues identified, or 2 variances identified by the board engineer. One, I can consent to the board that whatever the calculations are for the half story, as determined by the calculations on the second story, our client wants to comply, but there's some questions about the calculation. So no matter what, that issue is not going to be a variance, and we're going to comply with the definition of half story. So that really, in my opinion, is off the table, because it's a matter of a handful of square feet, one way or another, to determine first whether we actually need a variance based upon what's proposed, and second, to determine if we are in fact over on that half story, how much we need to modify to make it conforming, because there is sufficient area on that half story to modify it to make it conforming.
Jerry? Jerry?
Yeah, I would like the applicants' professionals to go through their calculations, because they weren't done properly.
We agree.
The percentages are way off. And I think we need to hear some testimony on that from the applicant.
We agree. And that's, we need to explain how the calculations were made. And I think we have to decipher that with how Mr. Frieda made his calculations to determine, okay, this is what the second floor area is. This is what we're allowed to have on the third floor area.
We don't have third floors in Bradley Beach, my understanding.
It's a half story, third floor, half story.
Okay, and then there's another situation too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, so that issue, it is my opinion that the ordinance does not require a variance for what is cited. And from a legal standpoint, that's based upon what is set forth in the section that Mr. Frieda identifies. So he refers to section 450.13E. But in our opinion, 450.13E is not applicable to this application. So 450 starts with a preamble that says, no building or part thereof shall be erected. I'm going to emphasize the next 7 or 8 words, within or project into any required yard area. So what's a yard area? And it says, except in accordance with the following provisions. And then he refers to a projection of the upper stories of a structure containing a primary permitted use. That's that's what we're talking about here. Beyond, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong section. Section E, I was reading D. Section E, an open and uncovered unroofed deck or patio not more than 3 feet above grade level may extend into a required side or rear yard to within 5 feet of a side or rear property line. Well, first of all, we're within our building envelope. So we have a basically 40-foot wide property. Our building envelope allows us to have a setback on each side of one side 4 feet, the other side 8 feet. The building remodel that we're proposing is at least 4 feet and at least 8 feet. We're also allowed to have a building envelope at least 25 feet from the rear yard line. Our rear yard line is at least or more than 25 feet. So this deck is not within or projecting into any required yard area. The required yard area are the setback areas, the areas that you can't develop in without approval from the board, or that you can't develop in if there's an exception in the section of the statute we're talking about. So we are not proposing that 3rd floor deck into any required yard area. The second thing I want to point out, so subsection D talks about projections of upper stories. And again, that's also not applicable here because we're not projecting beyond the building line. And that section says, a projection of the upper stories of a structure containing a primary permitted use, again, that's us, beyond the building line. So what's beyond the building line? Our building line, this deck is immediately above the rear portion of the building line. So we are not beyond that building line. And then it says, of the lower stories of not more than 24 inches shall be permitted, provided the projection does not encroach into any required yard area. And again, we are not encroaching into any required yard area because we are within the allowable building footprint. And then it says, and does not violate the covenants of any deed or deeds to the property upon which a projection is made. Such projections shall not, however, be permitted along the Main Street frontage. Well, we're not on Main Street, so that's not applicable. So with those 2 provisions, what is proposed here under the current ordinance is completely within the building envelope that we're allowed to construct in. We comply with the side yard setbacks. We comply with the rear yard setback. It's not in the front yard, so that's not applicable. So it's my opinion, according to the definition or according to the terms of this ordinance, and again, section 450.13, the initial statement is permitted yard encroachments. So what can an applicant do to encroach into yard areas? We're not doing that. We're fully in compliance here. And I want to emphasize the fact that the zoning officer did not indicate that this is a variance either. The only variances that the zoning officer identified for this application was because of the lack of the deficient width, as well as the deficient lot area. So our clients have an interest in constructing a fully conforming renovations to their property. They're utilizing the existing footprint. What they're proposing is totally within the setback areas. It doesn't encroach into any yard area, and it doesn't violate section 450-13 in any respect.
Mr.
So,
Frieda,
Mr. Chair, yeah.
I gotta ask you for your expert X on this.
No, so I would concede to that point.
Excuse
Based
me,
on-
Mr. Frieda, I'm very
Yep.
sorry to interrupt. Before we begin, may I swear you in? I don't think we've done that yet.
Sure,
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I would concede that point based on what was pointed out by the applicant's attorney, Mr. Beekman. However, the point that I will not concede is the fact that even though it's outdoor space, it's livable space. So they either need a variance for having more than 50% livable space on that half story, or they're gonna have to cut back to the 50%.
And-
That
and as
includes
I had-
inside and outside.
Sorry. Yes, so, and as I
Okay.
had indicated in my initial statement, we are going to comply. I think we need to run through the ordinance to determine what the calculations are and how they're calculated. But I would certainly consent, once we determine how we do those calculations, I would consent and I would represent on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. English, who are also on the Zoom here. I would represent that they are going to be in agreement so that they will not need a variance for that condition.
And if that's the case, then the only reason why you're here, unfortunately, is because of the non-conforming lot size.
That is
So
correct.
we're down, Mr. Chairman, we're down to two issues. One, nothing you can do about the non-conforming lot size.
Right,
And two, the whether or not, I mean, if they're gonna go down to 50%, then you don't even have to grant a variance for it. It's easy. So I guess
But the-
if we let Mr. Beekman move forward with his program there, maybe we can get some testimony from his professionals on that.
okay, but just before I go, one question, I think, so this outdoor deck is gonna be part of the 50%. Am I correct?
Yes,
That one-
Well,
it's within
I
the
haven't-
envelope of the, excuse me?
I haven't conceded to that.
Okay,
Okay,
I want to ask what my professional is telling our board to listen to. Okay,
that's
Mr.
right. That's my interpretation of what we are allowed to give on that half story.
Mr. Beekman, we have to listen to our professionals. You listen to your professionals.
Absolutely. As I said, I'm not going to concede to that. I'll make my argument as we go through our testimony.
Okay,
However, at the end of the day, whatever it is, I am representing that my clients are going to comply, so we don't need a variance.
okay.
Right.
And I'd like to then call Mr. Beekman. You want to present this case? Go forward, Mr. Beekman.
Absolutely. So Jeffrey Beekman,
Excuse me, I'm very sorry, Mr. Beekman. Just before we move forward, I just want to make sure I'm clear on something. So Mr. Frieda, I just want to make sure I understood what you said correctly. You do agree then that there is no new variance needed for the rooftop deck, considering what Mr. Beekman is saying about how they're going to conform with the half story to the 50%?
Yes,
Under those terms only.
yes.
Okay, in that case, my thought legally is that the notice would be sufficient because it sounds like there's no brand new variances being sought after all. So I guess we can proceed forward and hear the testimony on that.
that is correct.
Mr. Beekman, I know you gonna have any people sworn in? We'll do that at this point.
Yes, I will. And you know, Mr. Rosenberg, I am so sorry, Mr. Chair. I did not give my Jeffrey Beekman, the Beekman Law Firm, Ocean Grove, New Jersey. But yes, I have Mr. English, Timothy English is on the line, and I also have Michael Moss, who's on the line as well.
Would you like to swear him in now, please? This way.
Yes, please.
Can the professionals please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Yes.
Now, continue, Mr. Beekman.
Thank you. So I have Timothy English will be testifying on behalf of the applicants. His wife Maureen is there as well. She did swear in. And Michael Moss is representing us as our architect who prepared the plan. So I'm going to start with Mr. English.
Okay, thank you.
You have been discussing this application with Mr. Moss for quite some time, is that correct?
Yes,
And it really has been your intention all along to make this application without the need for any variances, is that correct?
yes, that's correct.
Unfortunately, you had a limited lot size situation, and you had to deal with having a deficient lot width and deficient lot size because of the current conditions, correct?
Yes,
And when we've talked about your variance application, have you looked around to the surrounding, your neighbors, to see if there's any property that you can acquire to make your property conforming?
yeah, there's no on the north or south of our property, there is no property that I can access to address anything relative to this application.
Okay, and the front of your property faces west, correct?
Correct.
And the properties that are to the south, how are they oriented? What do they face?
They're facing to the west as well on fronting on Beach Avenue.
The properties to the, am I doing this wrong?
The properties
I'm sorry, the property to the north, I'm looking at it the wrong way. The
The
property to the north.
properties to the north, front to the north on Second Avenue.
Okay, so your property abuts to the rear of their properties?
The rear of their properties abuts on our property line with their garages on the rear of their properties directly adjacent to the property line.
Okay, and then the neighbor to your, the opposite side, so that would be
The south,
the south side. That's, you abut up to their side lot line?
our driveway is in between the houses, but the house is very similarly close to the property line.
And as far as you know, that property is no bigger than about 50 feet in width, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, it's approximately the same size as your property.
Approximately, yes.
And then when you were looking to make some renovations to your property, what did you discuss with Mr. Moss? What were your concerns?
My concerns were that I really didn't want ask for any type of variance. All we were trying to do was to utilize unutilized or underutilized existing space within the house, meaning that the attic was unfinished and the basement was unfinished. So the extent that we could utilize that space to create more living space for us, that was our objective, without seeking any variance or viewing this as an addition to the home in any way.
And your objective was also to not increase any impervious coverage?
Yeah, our objective was not to go beyond the existing footprint of the house. So we didn't view impervious coverage as being on our radar, because we were just trying to utilize existing space in the existing footprint of the home.
Okay. So as far as you know, the plans that Mr. Moss prepared are utilizing the existing footprint of the home, correct?
Yes.
Anything that's proposed in the way of decks or balconies, are they extending beyond the existing building footprint?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. And the addition that's being proposed, as far as you know, conforms with all setbacks, correct?
Yes.
Have you had a chance to review with me the letter prepared by Mr. Frida from Liana
Yes.
Savakian?
Yes.
And in that letter, I just want to go over a couple of the comments in here. In that letter, and I'm going to refer on page 4, which is section 3D, it indicates, in accordance with section 450-41.A.1, driveway and parking area shall be located a minimum of 3 feet from the side lot line The existing driveway and parking area is located 2 feet from the south property line. This represents an existing nonconformity. Are you proposing any changes to your driveway with this construction?
No,
Okay, so you're looking for that condition to remain as existing,
yes,
correct? And you're not planning on widening the driveway in any way that would create a variance condition, correct?
no, we're not planning on widening the driveway at all.
And we've talked, and you understand that any approval for you for the variances that you are requesting, if required, and you have to replace any of the sidewalks or curbing associated with your redevelopment of the property, you understand that you would have to do that as a condition of this, of a decision in your favor, correct?
Yes,
And as far as you know, you don't have any other objections to any of has been stated in Mr. Frieda's letter, is that correct?
yes, that's correct.
I don't have any other questions of Mr. English. I just wanted to give an overview of what his intentions were.
Any from the board wish to question Mr. English? Any from the general public wish to question Mr. English? Continue, Mr. Beekman.
Thank you. Mr. Moss. You are a
Yes.
licensed architect in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I am.
And have you testified before boards in the past?
Yes, I have
And have you testified before this board in the past?
several times.
Mr. Beekman, we accept them.
Thank you. So, Mike, when you were proposing this, can you just describe some of the deficiencies or needs of the property as an architect when you were looking to make your plans?
Yeah, starting with the unfinished space that was mentioned by the homeowners, the basement, the attic could be converted into livable space. The first floor has a very, very small substandard living area or sitting area almost. It's a very small space. The second floor has 2 bedrooms in the back area that are 100 square feet, about 10 by 10, both of them. And that's would be considered small in today's standards. Also, very little closet space there, as is typical of many of our shore or of our local homes. They were meant to come down from wherever and just spend the weekend, spend a week there. So the bedrooms and most of the projects that I get are without closets or very small closets, and the bedroom sizes are substandard to today's. So that's why we were looking to expand the back 2 bedrooms to make those bigger with more closet space, basically converting it to a year-round livable structure versus a vacation home or short-term rental type property. And then also take advantage of the increasing the attic or half story above and adding a bedroom above there.
And that bedroom would be in that proposed half story?
That's correct. 1 bedroom and a full bath up there.
Okay. And you did hear the testimony and my initial statement as far as compliance with that half story. We have some areas of where we can change to the extent that we need to comply.
Absolutely. We went over today three different sets of floor calculations, depending on how we're interpreting the definitions, and all of them will accommodate a reduction in square footage as required to be variance free.
Okay. Before we get into that issue, so what's proposed in the basement? Are there any living or sleeping quarters proposed in the basement?
There's no living or sleeping quarters. As an architect, we're all about life safety first. So we do not do bedrooms in the basement. That's a big fire code violation as well as a local zoning violation.
All right. So let's run through some of the basic variance and waiver requests in Mr. Avaki, I'm sorry, Mr. Frieda's letter. So section 1, 3A1, we're on page 2 now. With what's proposed, is there going to be any change to the front porch as far as the footprint of the porch?
No change to the footprint of the porch on the first level, existing to remain.
Okay. And what about, is there anything proposed above the existing first story porch?
Yes, there's right now it's roofed over, and we were proposing to do an open deck, which is permitted by ordinance directly above the porch below. Then he had a access door, French door to it from the bedroom above.
Okay, and as far as you know, the setbacks, all that conforms to the average setback?
Yeah, setbacks were all good.
Okay. And the same thing with respect to that second floor deck, that will conform to the ordinance?
Yes, directly above.
Is there a roof over it?
Yeah, it's there is no roof over it. No, it's an open deck. That's all it's permitted there. That's what it will be. We are extending the roof across the front porch where there is no roof right now. So that would be at the first floor level, or the deck level, second floor deck level. So it's covering the lower porch.
Okay, and how many, so you're adding roof, you said?
We're adding a small 50 square foot section of roof there, yes.
So right now, the porch, there's a section that's uncovered?
Yes, the existing porch roof covers roughly 2/3, well, 3/4 of the existing porch. We're gonna make it a full roof across.
Okay. And now if we go to page 3, section B. Let's go to the third section. Are we in compliance with the side yard setbacks with the addition that's being proposed?
We are directly over the existing footprint. We are compliant with the side yard. One is 4 feet and the other is 8 feet required because
Okay.
lot width. And actually, I have set back the second floor. I believe it's A2.
I think you're frozen, Mike. You were frozen there for a little bit. You were talking about the side yard setback and you kind of went in and out.
Okay. Yeah.
Lost him again.
Yeah, we did.
Brother.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
any chance you have a separate phone line that you might be able to call in and put your phone on mute? 'Cause you're going in and out.
All right. Can I move to another area?
That could be.
Close to your Wi-Fi.
Sorry, members. I'm sure you've seen this.
It happens.
Yeah. My apologies.
Okay.
The second floor is set back an 8-inch setback to comply with the side yard setback from the footprint on the first floor.
8 feet, correct?
That's 4 feet on the north side.
but it's at least 4 feet and at least 8 feet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You said inches. I just wanted to clarify for the record. All right, so let's talk about your calculations for building coverage. And Mr. Frieda's calculations for building coverage, because I think we consent and realize that what is set forth in the plans in the zoning summary needs a couple modifications. Is that correct?
Yes.
So-
We,
The first thing that has to be corrected is you identify maximum lot coverage, but wasn't the intention there to be maximum building coverage?
that's correct. I did want to apologize to Mr. Frieda for that error. That was a editing error from another job for the lot coverage and the building coverage on the zoning summary.
No apology necessary.
So if you can just
Thank you.
describe the existing as and the proposed building coverage?
The existing building coverage is 35 or 1,040 feet, which is just under the 35-foot allowable. And with the additional roof on the covered porch, we're adding 50 feet. So it comes out, my calcs come out to 35.2%.
Okay. So if it's 0.2% over, is there any, other than that roof?
It's 10 square feet over.
Okay, so that by expanding the roof so it covers the entire existing porch, that's what causes that?
Correct. I can cut that back if we don't, if the 2.2 or 10 square foot is a problem, I can cut that back for the building coverage.
So if I could at this point, as demonstrated by the architect, it's a minimal amount. And I don't know if you would sacrifice aesthetics for that. Would it be a hardship?
No,
Okay. Thank you.
no, it could be cut back.
Okay.
I guess cutting it back would change the second floor porch as
No,
well?
actually, the second floor porch doesn't conflict with that roof area. It's separate.
Okay.
It's next to it.
Okay, it's directly above, but it's slightly smaller. Is that the idea?
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So
And
we
then
can, that roof can comply, so we don't need a variance for it.
yes,
All right. So I would propose that so we avoid any variances because our notice did not notice for it, even though I think.
okay.
All right. Okay.
Impervious coverage was not going to change at all, so it is existing is existing.
Okay.
And I don't know. I think we're over slightly on that. So not an easy survey there to determine all of that. It's a 15, 1 inch equal 15 scale, which is unusual. And
Okay. And going through 3B, 7, and 8, which is on page 4, there aren't any changes proposed to those two conditions, correct? The detached garage and the
no changes.
rear setbacks for the detached garage and the side yard setback.
Correct.
So let's go back and talk about the calculations and how you did the calculations for the second floor. And just before we do that, I want to read into the record the definition for half-story as well as floor area, which we think are applicable as to how we determine the calculations. So I'm going to start off with floor area in the definitions, and this is taken out of the ordinance. So floor area is defined as the total enclosed floor area of a building measured from the exterior face of a structure used for residential purposes or for business or commercial activities, which, in the case of the latter, includes customer facilities, showcase facilities, storage and sale facilities. So really, I think we can focus on the total enclosed floor area of a building measured from the exterior face of a structure used for residential purposes. And then it says floor area shall be computed as follows, and it identifies A, B, and C. B indicates second and third floor areas shall be considered as floor area only when the side walls are at least 5 feet high in height over a finished floor and reach a ceiling height of at least 7 feet. So I think that's critical here as far as defining the second floor calculations. Do you agree, Mr. Moss?
I do.
Okay. And then again, I want to read into the record the definition of half story in the ordinance. And it indicates a story under a sloping roof, which may have dormers with windows, having a floor area. So you have to substitute the definition of floor area, not exceeding 50% of the floor area below it. And it says the roof rafters shall intersect the exterior wall within 1 foot of the floor of said half story. So let me first ask you this, Mr. Moss. Your roof rafters that you're proposing on the 3rd floor, do they comply with the, they shall intersect the exterior wall within 1 foot of the floor of the half story?
They do at the gable, main gable roof. The dormers are the dormers. If you extended those rafters down, then they would comply.
Okay. So when you look at calculating your half story, where do you start?
I've been doing that for a while. I start with the floor area, and I don't add in the stair area. That's the way that's the way I normally do it, because I don't consider the stair as part of the livable area or the floor area. It's not a floor, and you don't live on a stair. So with that calculation, which is where we started, the total floor area without stair and without deck would be 818 square feet on the 2nd floor, and then the attic floor would, without stair and deck, would be.
Before we do that, Mike, before we do that, let's just talk about the 2nd floor, because that's going to determine what we're allowed to do for the 3rd floor.
Okay.
Okay. So you just indicated that your calculations, you just recalculated them today?
I did.
Okay.
Without the way I do it, without the stair involved, I also have the 2nd floor with deck in the front, and that would be 868 for the floor area, 135 for the deck, which comes out to 1,003. And I think Mr. Frieda had 999, or so we're within 4 square feet on that calc.
Okay, so the 818 represents all of the interior livable space except for the stairs?
Correct.
Okay, and the 1003 represents all of the livable split space plus the deck, also excluding the stairs.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you made your initial calculation, why didn't you use the deck?
Because of the definition of floor area. I didn't, the definition of floor area is within the floor area within the exterior walls. So I did not include any exterior space.
Okay, so the question becomes is whether we utilize the deck or not the deck. But to determine that, I think we have to look at the definition. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. If I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify for purposes of this, are we required to include the stairs in the calculation?
Frida, clarify the stairs and the outdoor deck, is that included?
No, the stairs are not included. I agree.
Okay, I just wanted
However,
to be sure because I
Right.
think if you,
Two
sorry.
questions, the other, let him answer the other one.
however, I would not include the open deck because it's not surrounded by the exterior walls of the structure.
okay, so,
So the floor area is 818 square feet?
868 or 800 and whatever number Mr. Moss has.
Okay,
okay. So.
Okay,
All right, so we've identified, thank you, we've identified that we don't have to calculate the decks when we're making this determination. So,
no,
all right, so based on that, Mr. Moss, calculating the third floor area without the decks, we've asked you to also take a look at that and recalculate your numbers, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, and based upon what the plans show right now, did you have a chance to calculate that today without the deck and without that third floor deck and without the stairs?
yes, without the deck is 414. Without the deck or stairs,
Okay,
414 square feet. If you add this 48 square feet for the stairs, it's back to 462.
right, but I think we
We're not gonna do this. Yeah, we don't.
I think we're in agreement that we don't have to do the stairs. So based upon those calculations, if 818 is the calculation for the second floor, we need to be no more than 409 square feet if I'm doing my math correct. Is that right?
That's correct, and I'm at 414, so we're 5 or 6 feet over.
Okay. So there's no issue architecturally in modifying these plans to correct the size of that half story so that it fully complies with the ordinance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you would certainly, as a condition of any approval, and as well as the representation from myself, as well as Mr. English and Mrs. English, you will represent to the board that you will provide the calculations that are necessary to show what the calculations are for the second floor to be agreed upon by Mr. Frida, as well as what the calculations are for the third floor / half story as agreed upon by Mr. Frida. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There's a lot of ability here to comply with however we want to do that.
So in light of that, there's no intention of having a variance associated with that.
No,
Let me reiterate that for the record, correct?
Mr. Frida. Excuse me, Mr. Frida, the
Yes.
409 square feet on the third floor, is that with the deck or without the deck, that outdoor deck?
it does, I believe it does not include the outdoor deck, but I'm not
But you-
100% sure.
But the outdoor deck on the third floor is considered living space, correct?
Well, let me explain that the outdoor deck on the half story is within the footprint of the building. So in my estimation, that is included in the calculation for the half story. The porch or deck above the lower porch is not included because it is not within the walls of the foundation. Okay, so that's why that is not included. So as long as the applicant can demonstrate that the space within the footprint of the building at the half story is less than 50%, then we're good. But I don't know if it's that close. Because I don't know if they've included the new open deck at the back of the house.
Well,
Mr. Beekman, have you included that in that 409 square feet?
I think the testimony was that if the deck areas are not required according to the definition, if you're not including the deck area on the second floor, you can't include the deck area on the third floor. You can't have it both ways.
Yes, you can, because the deck on the front, the second floor, is not within the walls of the building. The deck on the back on the half story is within the walls, the exterior walls, the footprint of the building. So variance is going to be needed for that. I'm not saying it's that big of a deal. I'm just saying you need a variance for that.
So it's not within the walls of the third floor though. So how is that different?
It is within the walls of the, there is no third floor. It's a half story.
Okay, yeah.
I'm talking about the deck that you described, new open deck at the rear of the building.
Only a portion of that is, I guess that's what we have to resolve here. Only a portion of that rear deck is at the back of the building.
Why wouldn't the whole thing be at the back of the building? You're
Because-
extending your roof lines out on the ground floor, right? And you're extending them out on the second floor.
Yeah, but the extended roof lines are not livable area. So the,
So that deck is
if I look at
overhanging.
the plans,
What's below the deck?
below the deck is the second, is the back of the second floor, but the third floor stops 5 feet from there. The third floor ends with windows.
No, it doesn't. You have to include the open space, the deck.
If you're
That's all
including
livable
it there, then
space.
based on the definition, if you're including it there, then you also have to include that space on the second floor.
No, I don't, because on the second floor, it's over an open porch. In the back, it's over bedrooms. It's not that big of a deal. I would ask for the variance for it. I mean, I don't know. We just got to keep it straight.
If I can just interject, I would like to ask, if I can ask Mike Moss a question here. Is that an accurate description? Because there is a portion of the, where the deck is on the south side. Is that over the second level, or is there some portion of that that is truly just the deck?
It's all over the footprint below the second floor.
Okay, thank you.
I don't mean to make a big deal out of it, but I have to enforce the ordinance, and that's what the ordinance asks for.
And I'd just like to put out there a reminder, if, I would defer to Jerry, if there is a variance necessary that wasn't noticed for, that's going to be a problem.
Well, I actually I wanted to talk to Mike about some other things as far as the definition as well. So I guess let's continue with, if I can, ask a couple more questions, but I may have to take a recess to talk to the client. So, Mike, when you were doing your calculations and you looked at the definition, what's your impression of the section in the ordinance in section, what is this? 454 floor area B, where it says second and third floor areas shall be considered as floor area only when the side walls are at least 5 feet in height over a finished floor and reach a ceiling height of at least 7 feet. So Mr. Fried is indicating that he believes the deck, which certainly is over the finished floor below. But let's talk about at least 5 feet in height and reaches a ceiling height of at least 7 feet. Does the deck area, is that part of that definition?
I disagree respectfully with the board engineer. There is, it's exterior space in my view, reading that definition. All the walls are not 5 feet, or there is no wall around the deck area that's 5 feet or more, and there's no ceiling over the top of it or no roof. So I'm reading the definition differently.
And all those, that definition's referring to space under the roof, and it comes from the building codes. That whole thing. It allows you to take advantage of that half story. But once you
Yes,
open
but
it
I
up
think
now, the outside,
I think our point here, our argument here is that we are not developing any space that has a ceiling height at all. And we don't have any walls in that area that are in excess of 5 feet. So those areas that are open to the exterior should not be included in the calculation. And only the 409 feet should be what is included in the calculation.
well,
with the
why
interior
wasn't the
area.
409 feet included in the first place?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Why wasn't that 409 feet included in the first place?
It was. The plans say. The plans say 414 feet. And the plans say that there was an incorrect calculation of the second floor of 868.
But there's that corner of the building you guys referred to. I didn't know if that was included in that or not.
The corner where the deck is.
Yeah.
That is not, I think Mr. Moss concedes that was not included, but I think he also indicates it wasn't included because it's not within that definition of floor area. And that's our
right.
argument there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have my interpretation, you guys have yours, I understand that, but why would you say that that one little piece is and the rest of it isn't?
Well, when you were talking about calculate, I don't think any of it is. My point was there's a section that, so the furthest rear portion of the building goes back to where the windows are shown. And if you look to what would be the south, there's a section of that deck that comes off where the back of the building is. That's actually where the door is into the deck.
Yep.
So
Okay,
if we include that area, I think I could maybe concede to that because the actual building is further back in that section. But anything to the east of that is completely open.
You're talking about completely open on the first floor. On the first floor.
What's that?
You're talking about on the first floor, on the ground floor.
No, I'm talking about the half story. So
No, the part that's completely open.
The section that's completely open to the east, from the windows to the east, there's a 5 foot by approximately I don't know, maybe 22 feet, 23 feet is completely open beyond the back of the building line on that half story.
Well, yeah, what you're saying is you basically stop the roof 5 feet. You stop the upper limits of the roof 5 feet from the back of the building on the second floor.
Correct.
Correct.
Understood. But I'm counting all the way to the railing. You're only counting to the back of the building.
That's correct.
Right. That's
Based on
where
the definition.
that's where we differ.
And I base it on the definition of how to calculate the floor area. And again, I just want to reiterate, because I think this is where maybe the board has to make an interpretation, right? Only when the sidewalls are at least 5 feet in height over a finished floor and reach a ceiling height of at least 7 feet. And I think.
Well, if you had a flat roof up there, you would have all whatever height it is underneath it.
But we don't.
Okay, but so I'm just saying, there's other interpretation of space at the half story than just what you're reading. You're reading it for under a sloped roof. And I agree with that. But I'm also saying you have a portion of the half story that you're utilizing that doesn't have a roof, and you should include that in your half story calculation. That's all.
Yes, but I think you have to go back to the total enclosed floor area of a building measured from the exterior face. And the point is, the exterior face is where the windows are, not where the railing is on that open porch.
I understand what you're saying 100%. I just feel different. I interpret it differently.
Okay. Well, because that is a critical issue, I think, particularly when it comes to the notice. I guess we have to have an interpretation of that from the board before we can move on with any testimony.
Yeah, if I could, I want the board to understand that that's my interpretation, okay? And the architect for the applicant has their interpretation. They're very similar in nature. The only difference is that one piece. So it's the board's pleasure to decide how they want to go forward with that.
If I may make one more comment, and I did say this in the beginning, but I do want to also emphasize the fact that the zoning officer did not identify that as being an issue. The only two variances the zoning officer identified was related to the width and the lot area. And I understand the board relies upon its engineers when an application is made to the board. I just want to point that out, that the zoning officer didn't look at that as an issue. And in our opinion, our interpretation is that section beyond the window is not to be included according to the floor area definition.
Mr. Frieda?
No,
Can I
and
ask
I concur with everything that he said, and it is true, the zoning officer did not pick that up. We picked it up as part of our review.
That's your job. Mr. Frieda?
Yes,
The way I interpret it, and I could be wrong, that anything on that third walking area, no matter if it's 2 feet high, 7 feet high, 12 feet high, is considered that area for calculation. Am I correct?
well, that's how I
Minus the stairs.
consider it, because, well, not anything, but because it's livable space and it's going to be used, that's how we look at it here. But
Right.
again, that's how we look at it, and that's what we've been doing going forward. So I understand the applicant's interpretation as well, and the zoning officer for that matter.
Because I interpret it as you can live, no matter how you conform it, it's all living area, that whole third deck. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that much space actually, but
That's why it's a half story.
well, I mean, yeah, the plans are. It's just that one little sticky point. I mean, I don't know. Is it something that maybe the attorney for the applicant wants to poll the board and see what they feel about it, if they would grant a variance for such a thing, if that were the case or not. I don't know. I don't know if he wants to go there.
Well, I think the issue there, and certainly Ms. McClear can chime in here, but I think the issue there is our notice did not specifically notify that issue. And if that's a variance issue, I think we're going to have to review our plans and perhaps renotice at another hearing. So I do think it's a critical juncture here to determine what that means under the definition of floor area for the second and third floor.
And just to chime in, I would, my recommendation to the board, our engineer, I would defer to our engineer if he feels that a variance is necessary. unfortunately, that is something that would have to be included in the notice. And it just wasn't in the notice, that was provided.
I'd like to just ask a question. As I'm listening to all this, am I understanding that the outdoor decks are considered living space as part of the calculations as far as the codes go? Is that what we're going back and forth about?
You can go a million different directions here. I'm simply looking at the area over the second floor, divided by half or by two. That's the permitted area. Everyone agrees. The applicant saying that it's only for the roofed area, but I'm including that 5-foot deck from the back of the half story. If you looked at the left side elevation on the plans, if you guys have them, that's all we're talking about, is that one little issue. Right, Jeff? Mr. Beekman?
So where? So the right side south elevation,
Or the left side? I'm looking at the left side north elevation.
yeah, I think it's probably easier to see from the south side though.
South side, okay.
Yeah, if you look below the south side, because it juts back into the property where the door is,
Okay.
right? So the 5 feet comes off the back of the property, but there's another, I don't know, two and a half, 3 feet.
Yeah, it's like a little
Farther back.
like, right.
Okay, so if you look at the left side, you only see the 5 feet, and you see the roof covering it. If you look at the right side, the south side of the building, you see the proposed railing area. That's the area we're talking about. But at the same time, as Ms. McClear has indicated, if that's going to be a variance issue, we're going to have to notice that, even if my clients do decide to move forward with that particular issue.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask the attorney a question?
If you want to take it.
Of
Right.
course,
No, I actually, Mr. Beekman, Ms. McClure, thank you.
Ask him.
Mr. Beekman, so from what I understand, you said at the outset, your client is willing at the end of the day to acquiesce, though you're not willing to concede. At the end of the day, your client is willing to acquiesce on all the variance issues except the underlying variance issue that we have to do for you. So now the question really becomes, are you willing to have to renotice to do this whole thing over again, or you're willing to acquiesce where it is my sense that I would be supportive of the underlying variance issue that we all are going to have to vote on? So, right, that's what it comes down to, whether you're willing to renotice.
Okay, so.
Right, you get what I'm saying, like you
I
lose
totally
time.
understand what you're saying, Mr. Affuso. So the comment that, or the discussions that we're having right now, in Mr. Avakian's review letter, he was calculating 999 square feet as the area on the second floor.
Mhm.
That includes the deck area. And if that includes the deck area, we can work some magic to make this work so there's no variance. But now we're talking about a totally different issue than where I started tonight. And now we're talking about if that front deck area is not part of the second floor calculation, but in turn you are calculating the third floor deck area, that makes a significant change in my client's decision-making and whether they're going to ask for a variance for that issue, for the half story.
But if you concede the second issue and we concede the first issue, everybody goes home, right? Happy.
Meaning if the board agrees, if the board says, no, we should calculate the deck on the second floor,
Correct.
if the board says, yes, we should calculate the deck on the second floor, we can make it work on the third floor. Taking that 135 square foot deck out of the calculation on the second floor makes a significant difference in what we started the night on. Because that's 65 square feet on that half story, and that's a big number. We have a lot of room to modify the decks and probably also modify some of the roof lines. But I don't know that we have 65 square feet to do that.
So if I may, based on Mr. Fuso's request and the response from the applicant's attorney, is the board willing to do that?
Oh, my question is, how are we calculating living space on an outside deck on a night like tonight? Is there anybody in this field that would consider a deck to be living space on a night like tonight? Maybe in the middle of August, that might be something to discuss. But how are we considering this living space when we're in the midst of a freezing rain snowstorm? I understand it's in the ordinance, but I'm just asking the question as what makes sense here?
My comment would be, do we want third story decks on top of it? I thought that's what this board and the council was basically against, third story decks. So that's just opens up another issue that comes about.
Isn't this also taking into consideration a second story deck?
No, this is a third story deck.
Well, the second story is included for
In
the
the
purposes
calculation.
of the calculations, right?
But the
Which-
third story decks are forbidden
Which-
anyway, I think.
Which they're saying they can make it work if that 135 square foot's included, I believe.
That's correct. If we include the second floor deck in the calculation, we can make it work. But if we're not including the second floor deck in the calculation, but we are including the third floor deck, that makes a significant difference in the application.
What happens if we don't do the third floor deck at all?
Well, under the ordinance that we're under, Mr. Rosenberg, we actually comply with the ordinance. The new ordinance hasn't taken effect yet, and we didn't make our application under the new ordinance. So another reason why it's critical for my clients to have a decision on the ordinance that we're under, and my opinion, and you have counsel to discuss this with you, but my opinion is you can't even consider the new ordinance yet because it's not a part of this application.
No, absolutely correct.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Frieder. Jerry?
Yes.
Just to clear it up. Your point of interpretation is the fact that the third floor deck, interior space and exterior space all falls within the roof line of the existing footprint. And that defines it all as livable space. And
Right.
that's it, whether it's raining, snowing or not, it's still all livable space. We got to look at that compared to what is below it. Is that pretty much in a nutshell?
Right, but if you do the same thing for the front porch as was asked, you know, it's a matter of interpretation. Exterior walls, what's the exterior walls?
I guess what I'm getting at, though, is if Mr. Beekman is forced to renotice, he's going to get sucked into this other rule, correct?
No,
Because time is going to elapse.
no.
No. Okay.
All right,
We're
so
still under the existing ordinance, not the new ordinance.
their application was made based on the current ordinance, and I think that unless they change their application, withdraw it and change it, so in other words, for some reason, if we didn't get past this tonight, it had to come back in April, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jillian or Jeff, they still stand under the current ordinance. Right, guys?
My understanding, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're back to the calculation of that third floor of how big it can be to be livable.
Well, I would propose on behalf of my client, and like I indicated to Mr. Fuso, we could accept the calculation utilizing the second floor deck for purposes of what I said from the beginning, we want to comply. But it probably does significantly change things if we have to include the calculation of the third floor deck for the half story, but we're not required to, or we don't include that in the calculation of the second story.
How big is that deck, the outdoor deck?
Mike, how big is that deck? You're on mute, Mike.
It's 117 square feet, guys.
The second floor deck is 117?
Oh, no, the second.
Third floor deck,
Third
third
floor.
floor.
Well,
the half
135.
story is 117.
second floor is 135, correct?
Second floor is 135.
Right. That's right.
And the third,
How much
and
is
the
the third
third floor
floor?
deck is 117.
Right.
Right. And in order for us, if we're including the calculations in this, if we're including the second floor deck in the calculations, Mike, no matter what we do here, we're going to have to cut back that deck a little bit in order to comply, correct?
Yes.
Or take the third floor deck and have a 300 square foot living space upstairs. That fits the parameter as well. Approximately, you got inches, feet to play around with.
I'm sorry, I'm guessing that was a comment. No,
It was a con, we're trying to help to get this done.
Yep.
You know, we shouldn't be doing this, but we still do it. People of Bradley Beach, we try and help our neighbors.
Well, and I think it's important on this application that there is a determination of what that means as far as floor area, and how the calculations are, considering what it says in the ordinance. So that's why we're indicating we can consent if the board so will indicate in a decision as to what that means. We can consent to a second floor area of 1,000 square feet. I'm sorry, 1,003 square feet, if it includes the deck area, which was how Mr. Afrida originally calculated in his letter. We can concede to that and make the third floor comply. If that's not going to be part of the calculation, then I think I have to talk to my clients about what they want to do, and I'll need a little recess.
And we need a guide for Mr. Frida and Ms. McClure, so. You want a 5-minute recess? Is that what?
I think what I need probably is the board to make a determination of how they're going to calculate the second floor, and then I can talk to my clients about it. I mean, I think the board has to make a determination of what needs to be included in that calculation.
Mr. Frida, could you tell us what you would think should be included one last time?
Okay. I know there seems to be a discrepancy in my letter and what I'm saying, so I apologize for that. Where, as board members, if you looked at it as the total half-story area, and you included the second floor deck, which is a part of the floor area, then you would have, I forget the exact number, 1,000, whatever. If you don't, you have 800 and something, and that causes the applicant to have to renotice or for the variance or make a significant change to his plans. That's where we're at. It's a matter, it's how you look at the calculation. And you go to the ordinance and the ordinance tells you something, but it doesn't give you every aspect of everything. You sometimes have to put input in your own head and brain. And I'm trying to stay consistent with what I've done. That's all.
Anybody else on the board?
If it's my understanding, the half story, the town is trying to limit the amount of quote unquote interior space. We're now talking about taking away a deck and increasing the amount of interior space. And I'm a little confused. We are a beach town. Porches are part of a beach town. If the board's purpose is to limit the amount of square footage in a half-story space, why are we now taking away a porch and increasing the interior space?
Well, if I may, it's not that I'm trying to take anything away. I'm interpreting the ordinance one way, and the applicant and others, the zoning officer included, have interpreted it a different way. That's all. It's not a matter of trying to take anything away.
Okay, then I misstated what I'm trying to get at.
You have two different interpretations. Maybe mine's more what's the right word? Conservative? I don't know. But
my thought is that if you give them a porch that's utilizable half of the year versus giving them an interior space that's utilizable an entire year, you're increasing the amount of square footage, which we're trying. My understanding is that you're trying to limit the square footage on the half floor. So I'm a little confused on where we're going with all this.
no, that's not the case at all. That's not the case at all.
Okay.
Okay, that is not the case at all.
I understand that he's, what you said, but they want both. The half story, 50% inside, plus the 117 foot outside.
No, Mr. Roseberg and Mr. Catelli, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is you can't calculate the second floor differently than you calculate the third floor. If you're going to calculate the second floor with the deck, then you have to calculate the third floor with the proposed deck. If you're not going to calculate the third floor with the deck, then you shouldn't calculate the second floor with the deck. Now, that's our position on this, and that's our opinion on it. Mr. Frieda has given you his opinion on it, but I don't think it's fair to the applicant to count the deck on one floor, but not count the deck on the other floor. It's in my opinion, it's either you only count all of the interior living space and base your calculation on the second floor to determine the third floor, or you calculate all of the livable area, including the second floor deck, and all of the livable area, including the third floor deck. And I can tell you this, no matter what that final calculation is on the second floor and what the determination is with the board, if it's one or the other based on our interpretation, my clients can comply and will comply with the ordinance. If, however, if the board's not going to account for the second floor porch area, but they are going to make an interpretation that they are going to count the third floor porch area, then that makes a significant difference of about 92 square feet on a half story. And that's a big number on the half story. And that's something that I would have to go back to my clients and talk to them about as far as whether they want to move forward with a variance. Because I think in that case, they're going to have to make an application with the variance. They'll have to modify our application to properly notice and come back before the board with that. What we're asking for the board to do tonight is interpret it one way either second floor with the balcony or second floor with the porch and third floor with the porch, or second floor without the porch and third floor without the porch, or I should say deck, porch deck. I'm using the same terminology, but I'm just asking the board not to account for the deck on one floor and not account for the deck on the other floor.
And if I may, in my letter, section B, number 4, the second paragraph, we say we calculated the second floor area at 999 square feet. So it looks as if we have included the front upper porch, whatever it would be called, deck in the number. So that one got by me because I've been calculating them the other way. Is that
So
the
that
area of
can-
the letter that you're referring to, Mr. Beacon?
It is, and I'll read it, just as it says, our office calculated the second floor area of approximately 999 square feet, which includes the deck. Our office calculates
Right.
an attic floor area of 640 square feet, which includes the deck. So as I indicated, if the board's inclined to calculate it using the deck on both floors, we can certainly comply. We can certainly comply with the ordinance. We'd have to review the application if the alternative is not accounting for the second floor deck, but at the same time accounting for the third floor deck. Because as I indicated, that's about a 92.5.
And the issue is, right, and the issue is that is somewhat misleading. So I can see where they would think that they were okay with the 999 square feet.
Correct.
Did not word that properly in my letter.
So what are we supposed to do?
So that's my mistake.
And now what are we supposed to do as a board?
Well, if I'm,
Um,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Frieda.
No, I mean, the only thing I would offer to the board is my apology, and that as I read that part of my letter, it contradicts what I gave testimony on tonight. It wasn't worded clearly. It says including the deck, but that doesn't mean that the calculation should include the deck. It just means that number calculated, I should have used the other number, the 818 instead of the 999. That's where we are.
If I may, I just want to, again, since we've kind of digressed a little bit, I want to read again into the record the definition of floor area. So the total enclosed floor area of a building measured from the exterior face of a structure used for residential purposes. Floor area shall be computed as follows. And we're going to section B, which talks about the second and third floor areas shall be considered as floor area only when the sidewalls are at least 5 feet in height over a finished floor and reach a ceiling height of at least 7 feet. And again, our argument is this deck area that we're talking about on the third floor does not have sidewalls that are at least 5 feet in height. And it does not reach a ceiling height of at least 7 feet. So that's why our interpretation is you shouldn't include the deck areas at all, but we can concede if you're going to calculate the deck areas, they should be calculated on both floors.
And the only thing I would add for the board is that I do believe you should include the deck area in the back over the footprint of the building. However, that is not how it was written in my letter.
Where do we go, Ms. McClure?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I spoke to Mr. Kittrick earlier today about this. Our opinion is that if a new variance is needed for the half story, the notice is certainly deficient. Mr. Frieda's interpretation of the ordinance, from what I've heard, his thought is that a variance is needed. So I would agree with Mr. Frieda on that. So, unfortunately, I would think my recommendation at this point, considering how much we've had back and forth on this, is that, to be on the safe side, I would recommend that the applicant renotice to include that variance, and then, the board can take it from there. It's, and very possibly grant the variance that's needed if the board feels that's appropriate.
Have to listen to our legal staff. Mr. Beckman?
Can I have a 5-minute recess, please?
Yes. Make a motion. We have a recess for 5 minutes. Second?
Second.
Mr. Wade, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording. Okay, let me just do the roll call. Ms. Leahy,
Here, yes.
Ms. Rosenberg, Terry.
You're not here.
Okay, Terry's not here. Ms. Brunel? Here. Okay. Mr. Wade?
Here.
Mr. Afuso?
Here.
Mr. Critelli?
Here.
Ms. Saracine?
Here.
Mr. Mayor? And Chair Rosenberg.
Here. Continue.
Okay, thank you. So I have spoken to my clients. Considering what has been discussed for quite some time tonight, they're going to have to sit down with their architect and review the plans, and obviously they were going to have to tweak some things anyway. So we are going to ask for the matter to be carried. However, before we do that, I did have 2 requests. One is I spoke with Mike Moss, our architect, and he would just like to discuss the calculations with Mr. Frieda. I am assuming that won't be objectionable once any plans are revised. We just want to make sure, again, if they're going to comply without renoticing for a variance, that the calculations do comply. The second request that I do have, since Mr. Moss has been on and testified a fair amount, is I'd ask that if there are any questions, either from the board and or from the public at this time, that at least we have any of those questions asked before we carry the matter.
Ms. McClure, are we able to do that? Jillian, you're muted. Are we able to do that?
I'm here, Mr. Chairman. I think that's fine, considering we've heard the testimony so far. We can go ahead and see if there are any questions.
First, let's do it in order. Mr. Frieda and Mr. Moss will be able to get together when the plans are drawn to recalculate. Is that what you suggested, Mr. Beckman?
That's where we're asking for. Yes, thank you.
I think that should be
Mr. Chair, I
fine.
just want to note for the record that Ms. Rosenberg did rejoin us.
Okay,
Okay.
just for the record, that's fine. I think with me, I don't know about the rest of the board.
There wasn't any additional testimony provided. I don't think it's
No.
an issue.
Any other?
And from my standpoint, I'd be happy to meet or discuss with Mr. Moss the calculations. Not a problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? We'll go in order. Any questions only to Mr. Beckman and Mr. Moss from the general public? Put a raised hand up from the bottom and we'll,
I have Mr. Cohen has his hand raised.
Thomas J. Cohen, 612 Third Avenue.
wait a
I
minute.
just have a
Do
question.
you have to be sworn in, Julian, for this or no?
No, for,
Yes, he does. Mr. Cohen, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give? Actually, you know what? I'm very sorry, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. This is questions only, so I don't think Yeah.
Okay, I didn't think, I just wanted for the record, because the carry. Mr. Cohen.
I'm sorry, I had a question for Mr. Frieda on the calculation that was presented that they were using the deck in the front for the second floor calculation. Mr. Frieda, I just want to clarify, that deck actually projects into the front setback, does it not?
Yes, it does.
And is that a reason why you would not calculate it?
The reason I don't include it is because it's not within the bounds of the exterior walls of the main structure, the principal structure.
But it's also in the front setback also.
And that is true as well.
Okay, and I had one question for Miss McLeese. Regarding the notice being faulty, is there the catch-all phrase in this notice that states any and all other variances the board may deem necessary?
Answer your question, sir. Yes, the catch-all phrase is included. However, let me just find my page here. I'm referencing the land use handbook, the Cox book. Essentially, the case law tells us that any notice, any variance, any new variance that an applicant is looking for needs to be noticed for if a lay person wouldn't be able to know let me rephrase that. The whole point of a notice is for a lay person to understand what the applicant is looking for. So in this case, the way the notice is stated right now, even though the catch-all phrase is in there, a lay person in my opinion would not be, and pursuant to my interpretation of the case law, a lay person would not be able to glean from the notice specifically that the applicant is looking for, this third story and the variance that arguably is associated with that. So for that reason, for a brand new variance that an applicant is looking for, such as this, it would need to be more specifically stated in the notice.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Miss Bucko,
Hi, Ariana Bacco, 200 Evergreen. Question for Mr. Moss. What is the current square footage of the second floor?
The current square footage of the second floor is 868 without the deck.
Okay. Thank you.
Deck adds 135 to that.
Thank you.
any other questions? Any other questions from the public?
I don't see any.
Okay, Mr. Beckman, are you going to be ready for April 15th or May, whatever it is?
We can be ready for April 15th.
With time for notice?
Yes. If we have to notice after my clients decide, we will get the notice out. If we decide to request that variance, yes.
Do we have room on that meeting, Christie?
We do have Irvington Manor scheduled for that evening.
They didn't give you information either yet, right?
Well, they don't have to. They only have to provide notice 10 days before the hearing. So no, I have not received anything on that yet.
Yeah.
I
we have-
can represent to the board after my conversation. My clients are certainly going to look at compliance. So we would not require notice. So I guess what I'm asking for is carrying it without notice unless we determine they are going to ask for that variance.
Is that okay, Julian?
That's fine as far as I'm concerned. We can, we'll just put it on the record that the application is being carried to April 15th with no new notice being required, assuming that, the talks that the applicant is going to have with Mr. Frieda can ultimately, come to fruition and that no variance will be necessary. If a new variance, if the applicant can't rectify this with Mr. Frieda and the variance is needed, then the applicant will have to renotice for that.
Is that okay with you, Mr. Beckman?
Absolutely.
I make a motion to that.
Second.
Second?
Mayor, a second. Ms. Brunel,
Yes.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Mr. Afuso,
Yes.
Mr. Fratelli,
Yes.
Ms. Saracine,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
and Chair Rosenberg.
Yes. That concludes tonight's business. Everybody have nice holidays, and we'll see you April, what, Michael? And we'll see you April 15th.
Very good.
April
All
15th.
right. Everybody
you
be
very
safe
much.
and healthy.
Good
Good
night.
night, everyone.
Thank
Hey,
you.
everybody, happy holiday.